Welcome back to this week's episode of Green Enterprise, a partnership between my company, Digital Venture Partners, a minority-founded portfolio company that focuses on cannabis, and Black enterprise, where every week I have a conversation with a prominent Black executive or leader within cannabis who I feel like is doing things the right way and setting a progressive example for how Black people can enter and thrive into the cannabis industry. This week I have a good friend of mine, Tahir Johnson from the National Cannabis Industry Association, who will be kind of discussing his background in cannabis and kind of the opportunities that exist for Black and brown people in the space. How you doing today, bro?
Andrew, what's good, fam? How are you?
Man, I'm doing great, bro. I'm happy to finally have you on, bro. I really admire your work and everything that you're doing in the space. You know, it's really easy to go into business to benefit yourself, but I think when you go in with the mindset of benefiting other people ahead of yourself, I think that really speaks on your character. So, you know, before we jump into the whole cannabis conversation, I would love to kind of get a background of your professional expertise and what kind of led you into cannabis and what was your experience before cannabis?
Sure, man. And I'll say I definitely, appreciate that love. I've been following the show. Y'all had some dope people on here, so I'm definitely honored to be among them. Like I said, before coming into cannabis, I actually worked in finance. And Hope Wiseman, who you had on your show, in 2018, I read about her in Ebony magazine and read about her making that transition from being an investment banker to owning Marion, Maine. And that was the biggest thing that inspired me. So even from that situation, and I'll say what I've always been about in life, I've always believed that seeing people that look like you achieve success is the biggest catalyst. So I'm just trying to pay it forward and do the same thing. And now that I've, gotten into this organization and I'm doing all these things, like you're doing, try to shine a highlight on people of color that are doing things so that we can pull and lift each other up.
Right. So that day you decided to jump into cannabis, like to finally say, I'm going to pivot, my professional resume in a sense, because it's a risk when you come into cannabis, right? It's kind of a stigma that you put on yourself when you say, oh, I work in cannabis. What kind of equipped you to make that step and what was kind of your first course of action?
Bro, it's actually a crazy story that you asked that, because the actual moment where I was sitting in the bank and I realized like, yo, I'm about to just go all in and transition to cannabis. I was actually sitting there with a client that was a retired U.S. ambassador, and I was trying to help her figure out how to manage this $2 million like inheritance that she got. And I started thinking about, like, I was doing both at the same time. So when I first got into the cannabis industry, I was working at a dispensary part-time on Saturdays and Sundays, but I still had my job as an investment advisor through the week. So I was working 7 days, and also having a Series 7, I'm supposed to report any outside business activities that I do. And so I knew that because cannabis being federally illegal, it was never going to happen. So there became a time when I had to make a choice. And as I was sitting there in that particular moment, I was like, I got into finance because I was passionate about helping people of color with financial literacy. But when you're a wealth advisor, your job isn't to help create wealth, it's to help manage people with wealth. So like where my passion was, I saw cannabis as an opportunity to use that same skill set to, one, help empower our people, because I felt like access to capital being one of the biggest barriers to the industry. I felt like I could make a difference there. So when I started out, I started an organization called Cannabis in 1867. And I'm a Howard alum, so my goal and one of the ways that I thought that I could create a presence in the industry was through that HBCU network. And through everything that I was doing, like I said, I went from the dispensary to going to lobby days with the Minority Cannabis Business Association. And I met Calico Castile, who was the head of growth here at the time, and that's how I ended up at NCIA.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing. I would love for you to kind of give an overview of what the NCIA is, the goal of the organization, and why, it's important to join something like that, to have, maybe networking or resources. Because my company, Digital Venture Partners, we actually are part of the NCIA, and I myself, I now sit on the marketing and advertising committee. So if you could give our viewers kind of an overview of what the NCIA does.
So NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association, is the cannabis industry's oldest and largest trade association. This year, we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And I say NCIA really has two different components in the way that it works. The first is that we have our government relations work that we do, lobbying for cannabis policy reform here in Washington. And then the second part I'll say is that we're really a B2B organization as a trade association. We create opportunities for our members to network with each other, to get education, to be able to just build opportunities for themselves in the industry. And one of the things that I'm actually most proud about that we launched is this new social equity scholarship program. And under that, I was able to extend membership to 80 social equity licensees and applicants from all over the country that we now have as part of our organization. So I'm really excited about growing the community in that way and all the opportunities that it's going to create. And shout out to you, man, for being on that marketing and advertising committee. One of the things I'm leading here at the organization is diversity. And I thought that it was so important that we have diverse voices and people, bringing that perspective to all different aspects of the organization. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to do in there this year, man.
Yeah, bro, I'm excited, man. I'm still relatively new in cannabis like yourself. I've only been in it for just about 2 years, but, I think cannabis isn't going to become the monster that we expect it to be industrially without people bridging their talents in, right? You need more vantage points, more viewpoints, more people with experience and different objectives. So I'm definitely excited to work with you. But my question would be, outside of that, the work you're doing with NCIA, what were some other ways that you kind of were able to inform and educate yourself once you came into cannabis and decided you wanted to really grow within the industry?
Right. So first I'll say that education is so important. And I think that's something that people undervalue. I'll say for me, I treated cannabis the same way I treated any other industry. So I thought that it was important to get education. So the first thing that I did was I took a course from Americans for Safe Access. That was like for a patient and caregiver course. The second one I did was at a place called Cannabis Training University, where I learned about all different aspects of the industry, from like how to grow, different things like that. And then I actually went to Oaksterdam, legendary Oaksterdam University out there in Oakland, and like taking that class on cultivation there really taught me a lot. So like for me, even though I'll say I have a professional career or position, and I don't necessarily have to learn how to grow, I thought that it was important for me to learn all those different aspects of the industry and then know so much. And then even as a bud tender, I'll say that's where I really got the most education, because when I was working in the dispensary, your peers, everybody's trying to be the best and learn the most. So it was like a competition. Who knows the most about these terpenes and cannabinoids, right? So like I was always trying to read and learn up on it. So I was actually happy to have that experience, starting off in the dispensary even before I got to a position like this.
As far as you touched on it earlier, what was the benefit that you got from your financial expertise coming into cannabis? Because like, as you said, being in wealth management, we saw a lot of wealth get blown in cannabis over the past couple of years in less than stellar investments and companies not really understanding what to do with the capital that they were fortunate enough to raise.
Right. Well, a couple things. For one, I'll say I have the perspective of the way that I see the cannabis industry is that we are still very young. I would say that you can make a comparison to like the tech boom early on, right? And you had a lot of companies that came out the gate and the numbers ran up, like every .com was just making all that money, but then the bubble burst, right? And then so the businesses that had good fundamentals, that were actually strong businesses, they're still here today, like Microsoft, Amazon, they're booming, right? But the ones that did not, they went away. And I think cannabis were at the same position where a lot of people saw this opportunity and saying, hey, the cannabis industry is making these billions of dollars and I want to go after it for that. But, cannabis has, there's a whole culture to it, right? There's more to it. It's not just the numbers on a spreadsheet. So I think having the perspective of having been in finance to look at the industry one way has certainly been helpful. But I'll say for me personally, one of the things in a way that I never knew that I would end up using this skill here, it's like the skills that I got in networking and building relationships through finance. Because when I was a financial advisor, like my job was to find people with money and get them to trust me and allow me to manage their money. So especially as a young Black man to be able to do that, I had to be creative and learn how to network and get in front of people and build relationships. And in my role now, I'm doing the same thing, right? Like I'm taking that scale and building relationships with cannabis business owners, people that want to learn about the industry, advocates, people of Congress, politicians. So that same skill set has been very helpful to me. And I'll say that's probably been the biggest piece.
And I would love to get your perspective on a question that I get asked often. People, when they find out that you're in the cannabis space, they say, "Oh, I want to buy cannabis stocks. I want to invest in cannabis. How do I do that?" What answer do you have for people who say, "I want to put some of my extra money into this cannabis company or that cannabis company"? Do you feel like that's wise at this point in the cannabis industry?
So I'll say yes, but I'll say one of the things that's important is, and this is the financial advisor in me speaking. So I'll say cannabis for one, I'll say that I think it has great growth potential, right? These companies that are just starting out now, again, making that comparison to tech, the ones that are winners, like right now you can get in early and buy the stock that's potentially going to be like the Microsoft of tomorrow. But like I said, cannabis stocks are also very volatile. So you have to remember, like, if you saw like last year, this cannabis stocks were hurting, like they got crushed. So I think when you look at cannabis as an investment, it's important to remember, like, don't go all in. Anytime you make an investment, asset allocation is important. So you want to put a percentage of your funds, like in cannabis investments, figure out how to make that a part of your portfolio. But then also, like, there's private investments in cannabis and there's also stocks. The same way you could invest in a stock, maybe you could make a private investment in a Black cannabis business and help support them. Also, when it comes to stocks, I actually did a video early this year. I'll say that there are a lot of platforms now where if you want to trade stocks to make it easily accessible, like you can trade cannabis stocks on Cash App, you can trade cannabis stocks on Robinhood. So I would say you can build a portfolio and kind of jump in that way, buy a little bit here and there and build it out as part of your investment strategy.
Okay, great. And then another question I love to pose is, I think the thing about cannabis specifically, you have to be able to adapt quickly, right? You have to understand what the industry is giving you and figure out how to work that to your benefit. How did this recent pandemic affect your business and kind of the plans you had for the year, and what adaptations did it force you to make moving forward?
Right. Well, I'll say on the NCIA front, it impacted us because one of our biggest things is our conferences. So, for example, the Cannabis Business Summit that was supposed to take place in July is a 10,000 person conference, and so we don't have that. So it's finding new ways to actually connect with people. And for me personally, I'll just say in coronavirus, I've taken my time to for one, focus on self-growth. So I've probably been doing about it like 2 books a month that I've been reading because I now have the time to invest in myself and do that. So by learning and being better, I think it makes me not only better in the cannabis industry in other ways, but then also now that, like I said, we can't go outside and everybody's social distancing. Social media has been big, right? I think I've figured out how to make this presence on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or other places like that, where I'm sharing the information. And that's been a great way for me to connect with people. And through it, like I've literally been having people hit me up from all over the world. So I think for people that are trying to figure out how to pivot in your business, whether you're in cannabis or something else, having that digital presence and that digital strategy is probably, is crucial to your business right now.
Right. And another thing that I noticed that you had picked up recently, you started developing your own content. I believe you have a podcast, correct?
I do. I
Okay.
do.
Could you tell us a little bit about that and kind of how we could follow that?
Yeah, man. So, for one, I've read Gary Vee's books. Like I listen to him all the time and like content is king. So I wanted to try to make sure, like, how can I reach people? So I'm doing the show, like you said, the Cannabis Diversity Report. I actually do that weekly on Facebook Live at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. And then I also convert it to a podcast. So I put that out every week as well. And that comes out every Friday at 9 o'clock a.m. It's actually available on every platform where podcasts are available. So if you search the Cannabis Diversity Report, it will come up. And I've had some great interviews with people on there. Also, I've started my own text community. So if you send me a text at 956-1446. I actually, text people back and respond to everybody that hits me up.
Right. And then another thing that we had touched on before we jumped on camera was the importance of LinkedIn, especially in this atmosphere where you can't really go to meetups and conferences or mixers, like you said. Could you touch on kind of the importance of having that digital presence and kind of what that benefit has been to you? Because I can say as a Black cannabis executive, it's really only like 30 of us for real. And it's
Yeah.
like, even though we are in different parts of the country, we have found ways to connect and support each other. Like if I get an opportunity, I bring someone like you get an opportunity, you bring someone like myself. Like how important is it for that Black cannabis entrepreneur to understand how to come on a LinkedIn and really grow their presence?
Oh man, you have to be on LinkedIn. I know most of our folks on, like, especially our age, right? Like millennials are on Instagram and whatnot, but LinkedIn is where all the business happens. And that's something that I learned as a financial advisor. Like I was one of the only young guys in the office. So like I learned how to take advantage of it then. But so that some advice that I'll say, like if you are in the cannabis business, then you should have a LinkedIn page like for your cannabis brand. You should be on LinkedIn. On your LinkedIn page, it should say like what you do and that you're in cannabis. If you are ready to really jump out there and pursue an opportunity in the industry, you have to put it out there on Front Street. And I noticed like soon as I did that, like soon as I changed my profile to say cannabis, even before like I got here to NCI, I started building connections. And LinkedIn, there's so many business opportunities. Like I said, literally people will reach out. It is also a great place for information because people aren't sharing their baby pictures. They're not sharing their food pics. When people put something on LinkedIn, they're normally dropping gems. So if you want to follow business, like I think that's the best place to do it.
Right. I always tell people LinkedIn has been the most consequential tool for me personally, because as you said, you got to understand every social media has its purpose. You don't drop a new song on Facebook because people aren't looking for a new rapper to listen to on Facebook, right? You're connecting with people and have a history with, just like on, let's say, maybe an Instagram, you're more willing to be entertained, right? Whereas on LinkedIn, people are there to do business. You either there to make money, spend money, hire somebody, or be hired, right?
Yep.
So LinkedIn is the perfect atmosphere to really grow your business acumen, because the same person who you can't get in contact with through Instagram because they have 1 million followers, they may only have 4 messages on their LinkedIn.
Right.
So I think that's something that our generation moving forward definitely needs to understand. But kind of pivoting back into finance, the question that I'm posed often that I would love to get your feedback on is a lot of young Black entrepreneurs are trying to figure out how to raise capital for their startup. What advice do you give to the person who's like, I need to figure out how to get some capital to get my business off of the ground?
Yeah. So for one, it starts with a plan. Investors want to see that you, when you're talking about getting some money from somebody, they want to know what you're going to do with it in a well-defined way. Like know your business, know your statistics. You should know this inside and out. Like know your industry, even if it's something that doesn't like directly apply. Like you should know what's going on in the general like landscape of the of the industry. And another thing I'll say, like in terms of asking for capital, you don't ask, you don't get. That's something that I learned from Carla Harris back when I was at Morgan Stanley. So like make the ask. Like you can't be afraid and be shy. Like when you're out here trying to raise money, you have to be able to, hit the people up, tell them what you're working on. And then also like don't lose confidence. Don't think because like you're having trouble in the beginning or stuff might not be picking up as fast as you like. You got to keep going, right? I saw a meme the other day and it's like you're digging for gold and you might have been that one more shovel, away from actually hitting it. So it's like you can't just get frustrated. It's a long game, and this is still a very like young industry. And the other thing I'll say, like with COVID, like money's messed up. Like a lot of people are being much more conservative with their money and their investment. So, I think you have to figure out like what makes you stand apart from everybody else, right? Like I think that always think like in Entourage, the TV show, like when Vince was about to leave Ari, who was his manager, and he went in there and he gave him that same old pitch presentation that everybody else did. But it was about that relationship. When people are investing, they're investing in you. Like, to a certain extent, it is the business plan, but you're the one that's inspiring that confidence off that relationship. So always keep that in mind. Like, it starts with you, and having that heart and that passion is what attracts people. Because I know before I got into the industry, like when I started out and I was trying to apply for licenses, the one thing that everybody always said about me is that they could hear and see and feel the passion that I had, to know that I was like serious about what I was doing. So I think that passion is number one.
Yeah, I definitely agree 100%. Another thing I would love to ask you about, you operate out of DC, correct?
I'm in DC. I live in Prince George's County,
Mhm.
Maryland, right outside of DC. Yep.
Okay, how do you feel about the current landscape of legalization along the East Coast? Because most legal states recreationally are, of course, on the West Coast or Midwest now more recently. But how do you feel about states like New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, Connecticut, who are starting to have these conversations about legalization? And how do you think that will affect, Black people in that area? And how can we better, prepare ourselves?
Oh yeah. So I mean, of course, when you look at the East Coast, I mean, we have a lot of cities that are densely populated with people of color. So it's a major opportunity, right? And so when you talk about like a New York, a New Jersey, a DC, becoming legalized markets, it's going to be a real economic opportunity. So I would say, for one, if you're already ready, then you don't have to get ready. So even if you're thinking like the legalization may come and be on the horizon, like a year from now, 2 years from now, I would start preparing and learning now. Because one thing that I found, like I said, because I started out like on that side trying to go after licenses, it's not a quick thing. Like, it's not like they're going to announce the license in like New York, for example, and you could just get ready for it to submit the application in a month. It takes months, years, like, of training and preparation. So I would say that, like, you should join organizations like NCIA. M for MM has boot camps, where they educate people. Like, there's a lot of different resources that you can get. The education, like I said, just start with the education. I'll also say that, like in any other industry, having experience is something that always helps you, right? So while everybody might not take the same path that I did to leave a lucrative job to go like work at a dispensary, if you can find some type of way to transition your skills like into the industry, that's also a win. Because when we talk about cannabis, an entire industry, everybody doesn't have to be a dispensary owner, right? So if cannabis is coming to your state and you're in marketing, then maybe you could start a cannabis marketing company. That fact that you have 10, 15 years in marketing is going to translate over. If you're an architect, go be an architect. You can design cannabis facilities. Don't try to be like, I'm going to be a grower. And I think that's the biggest thing that people need to learn. I'll say, like, one time earlier this year, I was in Missouri, and I literally met a dude then, and he was telling me, like, he's a CPA, and he was like, but I want to be in cannabis. I want to be a grower. And I'm like, okay, well, like, what do you do professionally? He was like, oh, I'm a CPA. Like, I do forensic accounting. And I'm like, maybe you could think about being an accountant. And literally that same day, through that conversation, I was able to make an introduction to him, to somebody that owns a cannabis accounting company. So, think outside the box, right? Like, again, you don't have to be a grower. Everybody's not going to be, Al Harrington or Hope Wiseman, but you can get in where you fit in.
Right. And people don't understand, especially with like the federal standing of cannabis and like the 280E taxation, how expensive it is to be a plant touching company. A lot of the opportunity lies outside of actually touching the plant itself, because that kind of frees you from all of these regulations and stipulations that you have to follow. I've met people who own dispensaries who say that anywhere from 55 to 85% of their margin has to be paid back in taxes to the state government. So, like, you're 100% right. You think outside of the box, but there's nothing wrong with staying in the box. If you're great at marketing, if you're great at accounting, just bring that over to cannabis in a way that makes sense to you. Lastly, I would love for when somebody says, I'm ready to make that jump, what do I need to do? Where do I need to go? How do you answer that question when that young Black person says, Tahir, I want to jump into cannabis, what should I do first?
Well, I'll say, first of all, like, I'm always down to like help and be a resource. Like, literally every single person that ever hits me up, sends me a LinkedIn message, Instagram message, like comments and says they want to talk, I will literally like help you. Again, like I said, I've seen a lot of parts of the industry, and what I found is that most of us people of color that are in the industry, we're willing to be resources and share. So I'll say, brothers and sisters that you see like on Green Enterprise, that you see on these platforms, especially if they're doing something that you think you want to do, reach out. You know what I mean? But also at the same time, don't be discouraged if that person doesn't reply or hit you up, because in a lot of cases, people are running businesses and doing a lot of things. So, you know, it's not like if they do not answer, it's because they don't care. So I'll say also be humble and kind of be understanding when you're hitting people up like that. But also when you're hitting people up, like think about like what can you do for them, right? Like when the conversation is saying like, hey, I have whatever skill or I'm doing this and I can help you and elevate you instead of trying to take, when you're coming to give, like it goes a long way. And the other thing that I'll say is like there's a lot of educational platforms that you can go to, and I would say it's important for you to actually, you know, get that real training. There's certificates like for example, Leafly has a bud tender education training. If you want to be a bud tender, go take that. If you want to learn how to grow, go to Amsterdam, right? You want to learn the business, take a cannabis business course. Like there's people that you know, there's all types of options. But I'll say that you need to pursue this the same way you would any other industry. As bad as I hate to say it, like being like, I like to smoke, like it's not a qualification, right? Like you're not going to get a job in the industry because you roll the best J's. So figure out how, like, their skills that you actually have, you can translate over.
And another thing I tell people is, you know, it's a lot of mobility in cannabis. So when you come across somebody today who's just maybe an intern or starting out, give them the same respect that you would give a CEO or a CFO of a company, because you and I both have met people who, you know, a year ago was just a bud tender, but, you know, now they're in a much more qualified position, because you can, if you are successful in cannabis, you can move rather quickly, like yourself, what you're able to do with the NCIA or what we're doing over here at Digital Venture Partners. Is like, I give somebody the same respect who's like, hey, I just want to get into cannabis, because 3 years from now, that might be the person who you really need to get in contact with. So it's really about, you know, having humility also when you reach out to these people or somebody reaches out to you.
And that's a big fact, because like you said, like when I was still working at the bank, one of the first people that I ever reached out to was Khadija Tribble. And it was when she was first starting out and started her organization, Marijuana Matters. Now she's the VP of Corporate Social Responsibility at Curaleaf. And we had that relationship all the way back then. Like you said, literally, it blows my mind that it's not even 2 years ago, I was a bud tender at a dispensary, and now I'm running diversity for a national organization, one of the largest in the industry. So like you said, it's like everything else in the world, being respectful, being kind, being humble just goes a long way and makes people want to help you and support you.
Right. And for those that don't know, Curaleaf is, I think, now the biggest cannabis company in
biggest cannabis company in the world. They just did an $875 million merger and acquisition a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shout out to Khadija. I actually had her on, I think, last month. She randomly messaged me, just like you said, like I had an Alabama hat on in a picture, and she was like, oh, you from Alabama? I'm not realizing I'm talking to the vice president of the biggest company in the world. So you really got to be careful of, you know, how you interact with people, because you never know where they may end up. But yeah, that's it, bro. I really appreciate your perspective and your vantage point, man. I look forward to following your story for the rest of the year. I would love for you to let us know where we can follow you and your company and your podcast on social media.
Absolutely, bro. So my podcast is the Cannabis Diversity Report. You can go ahead and follow that. Like I said, look us up. We're on every platform where podcasts are available. And then personally, I'm Tahir Johnson on LinkedIn. On all the other social platforms, I'm Ty Diddy. So look me up, hit me up. I'm definitely looking forward to connecting with y'all.
Hey, thank you, my brother. I look forward to working with you and speaking with you soon.
Hey, appreciate you, fam.
No problem.